Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another devlog for Dauphin. It's a pretty cold and dreary Monday morning over here just after 7 a.m., but we're on the other side of a really beautiful snowy weekend, the first we've had in actually a pretty long time here. And apart from spending some time outside crunching around in the fluff, I actually managed to hunker down and make some really cool progress on Dauphin, both this weekend and the past week. So I want to jump into this devlog by getting you guys all caught up. You may recall at the end of the last devlog that we ended up inside the cabin of the research vessel, where we could walk up to the navigation table here and pull up the sea chart. And the sea chart is meant to be a map where the player can view where they currently are in the world, which is not yet displayed, but also look at islands that they've previously visited or just know about and haven't visited yet. And at that point, they can zoom in and select that island for travel and view any information that they may have discovered about that island. With the ability now to select a new island on the sea chart, the next logical progression you'd think would be to actually travel to that island. The only problem is we don't actually have a second island yet. For basically the past entire year of Dauphin's development, we've been using the same prototype island. So over the past week, I built a second island. This is that old prototype island, and I hesitate to even call it an island because it's really just a big rectangle with a beach and some water at the bottom. Now, obviously for a real island, you'd expect the sand and the water to go all the way around. That's what makes it an island, and the player should be able to circumnavigate it just by following the water all the way around 360 degrees. Now for contrast, this is the new island I've been building over the past week. Obviously we've achieved the sand going all the way around, same with the water, and we've even got the nice animation of the waves, not only coming from the bottom anymore, but from the left and right sides, and even some detail here in the corners to let us round this island off. So in my opinion, this is looking a whole lot better. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think, but this is going to be our new destination once the player chooses it from the sea chart. Since I had to build out this new island from scratch, I took the opportunity to kind of make improvements to the way I'm actually architecting these levels. As an example, over here on the left in the hierarchy, you can see that instead of just one tile map, which the prototype island had, we actually have 4 tile maps, each representing kind of a different type of terrain here on the beach. So we have the base tile map with the deep water, shallows, beach, and forest. You can see what happens when I disable all these. Now, each of these tile maps is set in the terrain collision layer, but each tile map also is in its own group. For example, this is going to be in the deep water group, the shallow water group, the land group, and I think forest is also in the land group. What this lets me do is make a check from the player as we're exploring the island to see what type of terrain we're walking on. With this information, I can modify the player's behavior when we're interacting with a certain type of terrain. For example, here in shallow water, I can apply a shader and change the player's movement speed to make it look like he's wading around in the shallow water. And similarly, when we get out to deep water, I can apply a different shader effect to make it look like he's treading water all the way up to his chin and slow him down even further. I think this is just a much more immersive way to interact with the world rather than preventing the player from going into this water at all, especially in a game about a marine biologist. You can probably tell at this point that I've gone a little off track with my work on sailing, and instead I've been building out some smaller details to make exploration feel just a little bit more immersive. To be honest, I am really enjoying that. I'm enjoying putting in some details that just make the game more enjoyable for me to play with every day as I'm building it. So this morning I think I'm going to add another small detail that's been requested in so many comments in my previous devlogs, and that is footprints in the sand. I've got a pretty good idea how I'm going to build this, so I'm just going to dive right in and I'll let you guys know how it turns out. Alright guys, it is now Wednesday morning just after 7 a.m. This update's coming a little bit later than I would have hoped, but in any case, I did build out a system for the footprints that I'm pretty happy with. So we'll go ahead and jump in and I'll show you how I put it together. First things first, we'll start out with a little demo here on the beach. And of course, you'll notice that as the player starts to move around, he leaves a little set of footprints behind him, kind of horizontal if you're moving left to right, and a little more vertical if you're moving up or down. You'll also notice that those footprints start to fade away after about 5 seconds or so. Now, there's a couple of details here that I'm actually quite happy with. The first of those is that the footprints are placed in a way that matches the player's stride. And that's not really just a timing thing, but actually a positional thing. They actually are placed beneath the individual feet when the feet touch the ground during the animation. And that's easier to see when I run to the north direction here, how the footprints are actually placed to the right and left based on when the right or left foot is hitting the sand. So I was really happy with that. Apart from that detail, of course, you'll notice that the footprints don't show up in wet sand, or of course if you're wading in the water. And similarly, if we run over to the grassy forest area here, we won't see any footprints either. I think the only thing that really still needs work here is the shape, size, and color of the footprints themselves. I'm not totally happy with what I landed on here, but I'd love to hear what you guys think down in the comments. In any case, I want to show you quickly how I put this together because I think it ended up being a pretty cool solution. So we're taking a look at my player scene here, and I want to draw your attention over to a particular child in the scene hierarchy. This child is called Body, and it's a Node 2D that has its own host of children that all represent individual places on the player's body. You can see that we have back tool primary and back tool secondary, and these are two places where I place the tools that the player equips that you can see on his back. I've also got right hand and left hand, which are used to equip the actual tools when the player is using or swinging them. And then with the addition of footprints, we now have the right foot and left foot, which are of course down here at the bottom. You can see how I'm actually using these positions if we take a peek into my animation player. I'm gonna go ahead and open an animation here, like a tack down, that might be a little bit more helpful. So you can see in my tracks on the left-hand side that I actually have keyframes for that right-hand body position. I'm tracking the position, rotation degrees, visibility, and Z index. Now that right hand is starting out here over top of the player's right hand on the sprite. And if we step through the animation, you can see that the position and rotation of that right hand position 2D changes to kind of match what the sprite is doing. This is what allows me to programmatically equip and swing any tool that the player might have. I can just set that tool as a child of the right hand, and because I have this animation set up, the player will be able to swing it. When I was building out the footprint system, I basically did the exact same thing, but with the left and right feet. So here we are on my run down animation, and you can see again I have keyframes for the right foot and left foot with both position and rotation degrees. As we step through this animation, you can see that the 2 points here for left and right feet follow the left and right feet of the player's sprite. With that set up, we now know the position of the player's feet during all of the animations, and the last piece of the puzzle is really just figuring out when to actually place a footprint. To solve that, I'm taking advantage of something that I really like about Godot's animation player, and that is the call method track. If I go back down here to my right foot and left foot, you can see that I have a call method track for both of these. When the player's left foot is planted here at the beginning of the animation, I call perform step on that foot. And similarly, when we progress to the point in the animation where the right foot is planted, I call perform step on the right foot. This is what helps keep the placement of footprints completely in sync with this animation. Finally, we end up in my player foot class, which is where we're calling perform step. In perform step, right now I'm just calling show footprint, and show footprint is fairly straightforward. We first check to make sure that we're on a type of terrain that we actually want to show footprints on, in this case just sand. And if we are, we create an instance of the footprint sprite, set its rotation, global position, and color, and then we add that as a child of the player's parent, which should be a Y sort. So that'll get it rendering correctly on the screen. The result is, of course, that perform step function being called every time the player's foot hits the ground, and as a result, a footprint is placed. With that fun little distraction out of the way, I think it's probably time for me to get back to work on sailing. Unfortunately, the next task I have for sailing is one that I've been dreading for quite some time. Because I want the player to have basically full control over the research vessel as they're sailing on the open ocean, I have to create a bunch of new artwork to support the boat rotating in basically 360 degrees. Now, it took me long enough to make just the one research vessel sprite you've been seeing recently, so I'm guessing it'll take me a couple days to crank out these other ones. In any case, I'm going to start chipping away at it, and we'll catch up once I have some progress. Alright guys, quick update. We have made it to Saturday morning, and though I haven't made nearly as much progress on this artwork as I'd like, we do have something for the meantime, and we're just going to run with it. So you can see here we have the normal sprite for the research vessel that we've been seeing over the past few weeks. If I jump over to this frame, you'll see that that's basically the same sprite flipped on the vertical axis. So we're facing to the east now, and only a few minor changes here. The door is now on the bottom, and the life preservers are up here on the top. Now, the other two frames in this file are what gave me a lot of trouble. This is obviously the research vessel facing to the south, and here I ran into problems kind of creating this curved front with the wood paneling that I'm using all over the boat, and also rotating the cabin 90 degrees because it's got this funny little sloped roof, and that wasn't doing me any favors when I was trying to rotate this. But anyway, this is what we have for now. We have a window for the captain to look out ahead of the research vessel, and our life preservers over here. And finally, the research vessel facing to the north. The same issues with the roof of the cabin, looking at the inside of the boat here at the front, and of course we have a door on the cabin for the player to enter. Now this is still very much a work in progress. I know I've got some visual errors here, but I think this should serve to get me back into the code, which is something I'm very much craving right now. Now I do have a quick question for you guys. When I started out on this task, my plan was to create artwork not just for the 4 cardinal directions, but also some kind of intermediate directions. For example, the research vessel facing to the southeast, to ease the transition from the player steering from the east to the south. Right now it'd be kind of a rough transition between these two sprites in that case. The problem is when I actually start to look at what this ship would look like rotated, because of all the straight lines in the wood paneling, it just looks really kind of muddy, and I'll go ahead and try to show you guys that. If I take my marquee tool here in A-Sprite with the M key and select this sprite, and take my mouse to the corner of the selection until I see this little icon here and drag, this will actually attempt to kind of rotate the sprite for me. And of course, the perspectives here are way off, but you can start to see what this kind of paneled texture would look like if all the lines were diagonal instead of straight. In my opinion, this is just not really an acceptable look for the research vessel. It's so contrasting to how clean it looks when it's kind of just facing directly east or west or north or south. So we're going to have two options here. Just keep the 4 cardinal directions, or basically retexture the research vessel to remove the paneling and just kind of create a flat texture that would serve well if I wanted to rotate the boat 45 degrees. So let me know down in the comments. As I mentioned before, it is Saturday morning, and though I have kind of a busy day ahead of me, I really want to try and get this devlog out to you guys tomorrow. So I think I'm just going to go heads down right now and try to end the devlog with a basic controller for the research vessel so that we can actually get this thing moving in the water. No guarantees, but I'll try to catch up sometime this afternoon. Hey everyone, it's now going on 4 p.m. this Saturday evening. Got a bunch of development done this morning and all my chores done this afternoon, which is a great feeling. So ready to unwind with the final update of the devlog, and I'm excited about this one. This may look a little bit silly right now just because I have a lot of work to do on these particles, but if you can look past that, what this really is the very beginning of the system that will allow us to physically explore and travel to new islands. This is a mobile version of the research vessel, and you can assume at this point that the player is here in the cabin controlling the direction and acceleration of the research vessel. So here we are at a stop, and I know I have to correct the particles for that, but if I hold down the W key, we will start to accelerate to a top speed. And once we are moving in any direction at all, we can start to steer the ship using A and D. And it's a very slow, kind of clunky steering, but that's kind of how boats work. So I'm kind of happy with this at the moment. And also with future research vessels, you could potentially upgrade those to have a higher top speed and more responsive steering, which I think is pretty cool. Apart from using W to accelerate, we can use S to decelerate. And really this just provides, like I said, the foundation for exploring the open ocean and traveling to new islands. I think the easiest part of this system was actually writing that controller for the mobile research vessel. If we jump into the script here, you'll see it's not that long. All we're really doing is capturing input for acceleration and steering in the unhandled input function, and then we actually react to that input here in physics process, steering the boat and applying that acceleration. The big challenge here, and the part that I'm most excited about, is the notion of this world scene in which the mobile research vessel exists. And right now for that demo, it's just a big empty tile map filled with these ocean tiles. But in the future, this is really going to be the entire ocean in Dauphin. All the islands are going to have to be discoverable from this scene. And I just can't really create a giant scene and throw them all in there. I'll have to create a clever way to load chunks of the world at a time as the player explores in a performant way that limits the amount of loading screens. And that's something that I'm really excited to build. With that said, I think I'm ready to wrap up all the great progress we made in this week's devlog. I want to extend a big thank you to those who took the plunge last week to support both Dauphin's development and this channel on Patreon. I also want to give a huge shout out to my Garami supporters, Cody Odin, Finnick Fu Games, and Mega Ombre. I'm humbled by your support and it really means a lot. As always, really hope you enjoyed the video this week. If you want to see the channel grow, consider leaving me a thumbs up or down to let me know how I did, and of course keep an eye out for the next devlog. Stay safe and I'll see y'all in the next one.